All right, good evening, everybody. So I would like to accomplish, first, thank you for the invitation and the opportunity to join you tonight. I want to accomplish two things in a very brief presentation. One is going to try to demystify this idea of foresight. So explain what a futurist does and what a futurist does not do. And then introduce some implications of trends related to the future of data and analytics. So that's the goal. Now, I know that most of you, the biggest question in your mind is, what is a futurist? What does this person do for a living? What did his mother say when he said he was going to become a futurist, right? That's always the question everyone wants to ask. So I am from a small community of what we would call academically trained futurists. So I attended a graduate degree program at the University of Houston in future studies, right? So imagine that Christmas dinner conversation with my parents where I said I was going to go to a future studies program. So this program has been around for about 30 years. It grew out of a culture in Houston of NASA and the energy sector. Both of those industries needed to develop a more structured and disciplined way of thinking about long-term change. And really, the subject is rooted in social change, right? So I am a student of studying how society changes. That's what I do professionally. On a personal level, it brings many challenges, right? I live in Brooklyn now, so when I go to a party, it's like I walk in and the host says, "Oh, here's Gary, he's a futurist," and the night's ruined for me, right? Someone will say, "What stock should I buy?" Someone will say, "Let's talk about Star Trek," right? I've never seen Star Trek. Someone will inevitably come up and say, "You're a futurist, I'm a nowist." Right? My job is to pay attention to now. That's what I do. And then by the end of the night, someone has had too much to drink will look me straight in the eye and they'll say, "What am I going to say next?" Because we associate this idea of thinking about the future with prediction, right? And a prediction, by definition, is a single point forecast about what will happen. It is a statement that says, this is the arena of uncertainty, and I'm going to say this will happen. Right? That's what a prediction is. And that is not what we do as foresight specialists. That's not what we're asking you to do when you think about the future. It is impossible to make predictions, single point forecasts about what's going to happen. Right? There's too much uncertainty, too much complexity to change. So instead, what futurists try to do is use a very simple framework that's used in strategy in the military and government called the Cone of Plausibility. And the Cone of Plausibility says, as an organization, as a professional community, you need to not narrow your sense of what you think is going to happen, but expand it. So instead of having a plan A, right, which you've all got printed out in your organization office, right, you need to understand what are the lines of plausibility, right? Not the aliens coming down and giving us the codes to free energy and wealth and prosperity, but what's plausible over a reasonable time horizon, 5, 10, 15 years. And then within that cone of plausibility, you need to be able to identify, slow down, you need to be able to identify what are the range of scenarios, what are the range of stories about how the future might be different, right? And then as a futurist, what we ask you to do is monitor the signals of change in the world related to those scenarios. And as certain signals happen, certain scenarios will seem more inevitable than others, and you just pivot as an organization. The fundamental activity of a futurist is being able to identify and monitor change. That's what we do. That's the focus of foresight. So this, for me, is really the calling card for what it means to think about the future, right? We're all driving down that road 75 miles an hour, unless we're on 95, and no one has said to us, these are the key signals of change. These are the signposts that you need to be paying attention to, right? Beyond what we always talk about in terms of our, the inner circles of the professional community, right? We are looking for those signposts. That's the function of foresight. So people will ask me, they'll say, how good are you, right? What's your track record? And there are absolutely projects that I've done well and, clients have been happy, and other times, wish I could have had that one back. Our metric for success is that we're not surprised, that we can come back at the end of the journey we're about to take in the next few months in terms of the project, and come back in a few years and say, we were not surprised, and I'm glad we had a conversation about some very difficult subjects. So that's the metric of success, is not being surprised in the future, not being blindsided. The mindset of foresight is much more of the artist, the engineer. We can't, there's no lever, there's no gears to make the future happen exactly the way you want. The mindset that you need to embrace is embodied in this quote by Yo-Yo Ma. You need to be able to wake up in the morning and move towards the things that you do not understand. Move towards the things that you might disagree with. Trends that you think, oh, that's the end of society. Oh, virtual reality, that's the end of society, right? You need to be able to have open and honest explorations of these trends, whether you understand them or not, or whether you agree with them or not. That's the mindset of a futurist. Right? So, how do we think about the future? There are, in general terms, 4 archetypes, right? 4 general futures that we could arrive at. And this was developed to give you a sense of my personal decision making. There are 2 programs in future studies. One's at the University of Houston, the other one is in Hawaii. And I went to Houston, right? This framework is developed by colleagues at the University of Hawaii. And the 4 futures are basically archetypes. So the first archetype is continued growth. Things are going great, and they're going to continue going great in the future, right? That's the first archetype. The second one is what we would call, wow, the clicker's working against me. The second one is what we would call disciplined or constrained. And this is where you look out at the future and you say, we're still going to do what we do today, but there's going to be stronger headwinds, right? So if you're Peabody, a coal company, coal's not going away, but stronger regulations, stronger headwinds. Microsoft, they missed the mobile revolution, right? They're not going away. They're going to get back into the game. They have a disciplined or constrained future. The third archetype is what we would call transformed. This is where you look out at the future and you say, you know what? We are not going to be doing what we do today, or certain units or certain aspects of our organization will not be doing what they're doing today. We're going to be doing something new and different. So if you're IBM, you used to sell hardware, now you sell software services. If you were Pfizer, your entire talent pool, everyone that worked at your company was a chemical engineer for 30 years. And now you go to Pfizer and everyone is a bioscientist, right? They transformed who is within the organization. And then the final one is called decline collapse. And this is where we look out at the future and we say, things are likely to continue shifting. We're unable to make that transition. And we might not go away, but our relevancy in the world is shifting. And this is manifested in Nokia and BlackBerry. What does Apple and Google know about the phone business? Right? And they went bye-bye. So think about your own organization, right? And just go out 5 or 10 years. And I want you to put your hand up if you think things are going well and you should be proud. Hands up if you think continued growth. That's all right. That's good. No snarking. Disciplined, constrained. Transformed. There's my people. And we're not going to do decline collapse, right? We're not going to subject to that. That would be too much. What shapes those 4 futures? What leads to one of those 4 outcomes? Futurists will often refer to as 3 mechanisms of change, 3 drivers of change. The first is a trend. So a trend, by definition, is something, it's more or less. It's an increase or decrease in something. So an increase in CO2 in the oceans, an increase in aging populations, decreased funding for education, decreased funding for arts education. A trend tends to go at a certain rate in a certain direction. And what that allows us to do is create forecasts, right? It's the most plausible future. And in the short term, it is these trends that define what's likely to happen. But in the long term, it is 2 other trends, sources of discontinuities that often lead to change. So the second source of change is an event. And we could have scheduled events like a presidential election cycle, right? We know there's going to be an event that will change the future every 4 years at the national level, right? Or you could see cyclical events, or you could see what we would call wild card events, which are low probability, high impact, right? So unlikely that it's going to happen, but if it does happen, it'll change the world. And September 11th is the probably most well-known recent wild card. If you were in the nuclear industry, power industry, and the tsunami off of the coast of Japan, that was a wild card. Low probability, high impact, right? And then you can't think about the events in terms of forecasts because you can't predict events. You can have a sense of what might happen, but in order to imagine a future shaped by events, you need to think in terms of scenarios. And scenarios are just stories of the future based on conditions that are different than today, right? Then the final driver of change is what we will call, I'm a professional too. I use a clicker, it's my toy, my tool. Choices. Choices are a reflection of our preferred future. This is the world that we wish to see happen, right? And choices are manifested in the investments in our people, in our partnerships, and in our places. Right? And the process that we use to understand the future based off of choices is visioning, right? This is like kumbaya, everyone feels good, let's have a visioning session, right? And there's certainly a role in foresight for all three of these techniques to imagine the future. In terms of our project together as you know, the arts and culture community, we're going to be focused on scenarios and forecasts related to trends. So I want to shift gears. That was like the first 2 months of my graduate school education, right? There was no partying in graduate school. Future studies school is very academic, right? But that was a hint of future studies. I want to shift gears now and wrap things up looking at implications of trends around data and analytics. And we're going to play a game. It's very similar to Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me, except I go around the trademark. It's called In the News. To set up the story, basically I'm going to tell you a story. Your job is to determine whether you think it's true or false, okay? And if you think it's true, I'm going to have you stand up and give me your jazz hands, your spirit fingers. False, stay seated, right? To set it up, I want to introduce something a little bit more challenging for some folks, right? Because I want you to be able to go somewhere tomorrow and go in a quiet corner and learn about something new. So this is what we refer to as a graph database, And a graph database differs from traditional way that we organize information, which is rows and columns, right? 40 years of data has basically been kept in rows and columns, right? And that method of storing data is mature. There's a lot of benefit. You know, there's no doubt that it's reliable and the performance is good. But that way of storing information does not give us the insights, the analytics necessary for how the world is now producing data, right? And instead of using rows and columns in the future, we're likely to use what are called graph databases. Now, this is a very simple version of a graph database. Really, the information, like each one has a unique ID and all sorts of wizardry underneath, but it's just the model. In a graph database, you have a node, which is the circle. It's a person, place, an object, whatever it is. And then you have the relationship between the nodes. Both of those are what we would call first-class citizens. They both matter equally important, right? So graph databases are about understanding the relationships between things and the connections between things, right? So here's an example where we have Adam and Chantel. They both live in Philadelphia. That's their relationship. Chantel is a subscription member to the theater, right? That's her relationship. And then we see she recently started an actors group, right, using kind of the meetup platform. And Adam saw that on his Facebook page that there was a new Philadelphia actors meetup, and he liked it. Where's the liking? Here's the liking. It's all going to come at once. There we go. He did it. He did it. So that's the relationship. It's different between the node. And then we see that Adam, he loves to read books and write reviews. And what do you know? Chantel saw that on her Facebook feed or her Twitter feed, and she liked that too, right? This is our modern age. Wow. This is great. So, pretend you didn't see any of that. What do we get from this, from these connections? That it's clear that the theater should focus a subscription marketing effort on Adam because he likes the same things that she likes, and that Match.com has an opportunity here to get them matched. Huh? Graphs are about understanding the relationships of things, and they are behind the most well-known kind of innovative companies today. Google is a graph. What's the most important, the best sushi restaurant in Philadelphia? It's the node with the most inbound links. Facebook is a social graph. LinkedIn is a professional graph. I don't know anybody that works at that organization, but I can look through my professional graph of who knows who that works there, right? And we are going to go into a world where we have graph databases that drive innovation within the world of arts and culture communities. That's my hunch. So what is happening is that organizations are starting to innovate around this. And the true-false story here, that was a long way to get into the game, the true-false story here is, in 2017, will Houston launch what it calls the Houston Culture Graph as a shared data and analytics platform for the region to develop marketing and engagement platforms. If you think this story is true, I want you to stand up and give me your spirit hand jazz fingers. Everyone saw the answer, so it's a little less climactic. There we go. You could just stand up because you've been sitting down, right? And I've got my eye on the clock to the organizers. This one is false. This one is false. I know. But it will be true at some point, right? The first takeaway here is, we're moving into an age where you're going to need shared data and analytics infrastructure, right? Because people are having experiences across their lives, across this community that matter to all of you. And the notion that you are going to have, we're going to have our data analytics strategy and they're going to have those, that needs to be, I think, rethought. That's the first takeaway. But the real thing that we want to unpack here is asking the question, what types of data are growing in the world? And there are 4 buckets that I just want to very quickly tease out here. The first bucket of data that's growing in the world, and the one that's most familiar to us, is social data, sentiments, relationships, what we do, what we like. That's what everyone talks about today, right? The category that's growing currently is what we would call health data, right? This is people that wear Fitbit devices and they track how many steps they take, how long they've been sitting down, how well they slept the night before. And for some people, they think that's totally creepy, right? That you're tracking how many steps I take and how long I sit at my desk? That's just creepy. You own that data? That's my data, right? And it's creepy. And then other people think, oh my gosh, I am awful. Like, I can't believe how little I walk and how long I sit at my desk all day. And it's very compelling to have that information and that insight. That's growing. Then we see this growth in what we call device data. This is this notion that it's not just the human reading the book, but the book is reading the human. And an ebook, we understand, how many people flip the page, how fast they flip the page, where everyone took notes. And some people think that is super creepy, right? That they know this. And other people think, now we can actually know how people engage with the material, right? So we can imagine a world where our physical environments have devices. Guides that you would walk around in a museum are going to start watching your behavior and understanding your level of engagement. In the retail world, we already see light bulbs that can understand patterns within rooms. So the light bulb is watching the ground, right? Really creepy to some people and compelling to others. And then the final source of data is what we will call learning or experience data. And this is, I could talk for an hour and a half on this one alone. There is a standard called Experience API, which is basically a way of recording enriching experiences. I did this statements. I went to this museum. I watched this lecture. I taught this workshop. Experience data, learning data. And what that could be is, we can know that there is a teenager that's trying to learn a new form of dance by watching YouTube videos and then say, hey, come to this performance. We can know when there's a senior citizen that's exploring some facet of history that's just super compelling to them by, attending programs at the library. And we can say, hey, come to this museum program. Learning data is the biggest opportunity for us. Right? For some people, it's going to be creepy, and some people, it's going to be compelling. So I want to wrap up with just a very kind of, I think a profound example of this creepy, compelling line, right? Because there is a line. And for some people, it's like, everything is creepy, I hate it, right? I'm going to move to West Texas. And for other people, sometimes that creepy line starts to move. Like, I'm actually healthier now that I know how much I sit. It's compelling, right? So who knows what this is? Disney World's the Magic Band, right? So basically, the compelling stuff of this is like you don't have to wait in line. You just put yourself in the queue, and then it buzzes you when it's your turn, right? Leave your wallet in the hotel room. Just rub the band. Don't give it to your kids, and leave the wallet at home. That's compelling, right? The creepy stuff is like when you've pre-ordered the lunch because your kids are only going to eat chicken fingers and French fries, right? So you pre-order the lunch. And then you go in and you sit down and you don't talk to anybody, and the next thing you know, someone brings you your food and you're like, and you realize that the ceiling knows where you're sitting, knows who you are, knows what you ordered. And that's creepy. Right? But then you walk out after that lunch, and your children are walking ahead of you, and the next thing you know, Olaf and Princess Anna and Princess Elsa are walking towards them, and they're saying your kids' names. And your kids are crying because Olaf and Elsa know my name. And you think, that's magical, Disney, right? And it's creepy. But you probably put pictures of your kids on the internet, right? Don't hate the speaker, right? It's evolving. All of the organizations here tonight are going to have to confront the creepy, compelling line. We know that personalization is coming. We know that data and analytics is coming. These are trends that are converging, and they're going to place more demands, expectations for people that wanted the creepy line, like full embrace, right? Give me the best experience possible. You are going to have to confront this conversation, and I would suggest that you confront it sooner rather than later, right? How do you learn more about that? I would recommend 3 things. One is just to learn about the field of kind of data science, statistics with a sexier name, behavior change. All of these things are related to what we will call prescriptive analytics. This is the recommendation, right? If you like this, you might also like that. And everyone says, oh, they're so terrible, right? Like one time it said, like, you might be friends with this person. I'm like, that's my wife. So recommendation engines are improving, right? And then the final thing is the graph databases. And there are companies like Neo4j, and you go online and you go on YouTube, you watch this graph database stuff. It's fantastic. So I am going to turn things back over to Maud. In the days and weeks ahead, we are going to be looking out at the world and detecting signals of change, and then developing scenarios that challenge some of the core assumptions that we hold within the arts and culture community near and dear. And I look forward to going through that process with you. Thank you.